When John Hammond hired Steve Clifford 3 years ago, he had visions of him resurrecting the NBA franchise which represents Central Florida to their glory days atop the Eastern Conference, something they haven't experienced since the days of Stan Van Gundy and DeWine Howard. Yes, Clifford did get the team to the playoffs in consecutive seasons. However, a mid-season trade this year of two of the franchise's cornerstones caused Clifford to reevaluate his standing in the franchise, which ultimately resulted in a surprise move, with both parties deciding it was best for the franchise and for Clifford if they parted ways. So the question now becomes, what's next for the team that represents the sport's heartbeat in Orlando? And where do the Magic turn for their next field boss? For some answers, I turn to Brendan Kravitz, who hosts In the Zone every day on 96.9 The Game in Orlando from 3 to 6, who joined me this week to provide and review some coaching options for the Magic as they look for their next bench boss and to reset the direction of their franchise. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Hey, Brendan, if you're ready, I'll welcome you to the show, and I'm excited to dive into some Orlando Magic basketball with you this morning. So great to see you, and thanks so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Let's do it. A lot of big news to break down.
Absolutely. So I'm going to start you off with a little bit of a softball and just ask you about your initial reaction when you heard the news that Steve Clifford and the Magic had decided to part ways.
Honestly, I was shocked. I know that it was something that people in my audience here in Orlando, there was some portion of the population that say they saw this coming, that had predicted it. People were sending me messages. Do you think Cliff's on the way out? And I assured them, no. There's no way that that's happening. I'm stunned by it because you don't often get coaches that walk away from good paying NBA coaching jobs. And that's what Steve Clifford did. And then on the flip side of it, if you're in the camp that believes, well, the Magic wanted him to leave, why would you want a guy like that to leave? He's one of the best coaches in the NBA. He'd done a stellar job here. The only reason he started losing more games than he was winning is because the management team gutted the roster. So he's a really good coach. I'm sure he'll land on his feet elsewhere, but I did not see this coming.
And do you like the state of the roster and the state of the team entering another rebuild had anything to do in factoring into Steve's decision to walk away?
I think that's it. I think that's exactly what happened. You know, he's somebody that is 59 years old. He probably sees only a few more opportunities, a few more years left to really try and cash in on the resume that he has, the credibility he has around the league to actually win a championship or at least compete for one. That's the ultimate goal of anybody that's in sports, is you want to claim that highest prize, or you at least want to feel like you're close to getting it. Steve Clifford, I don't think he would have walked away if this roster was just a little bit more intact than where it is. They're in a very serious rebuilding phase. Who knows how long that lasts, but Steve Clifford didn't want to be here to see it out. I do believe that he was the one that really forced his way out more so than Jeff Weltman or John Hammond, the co-GMs of sort, asking him to leave.
And as you know, he missed some games due to dealing with COVID this past season. So do you think health also factored into the decision?
I think health factors into the decision in the lack of patience that, and I'm not saying that to disparage him. I understand it. He's at a stage in his career where he probably feels like he either would get fired because they're going through a rebuild, um, or the clock would run out by the time he was done coaching. This is a guy that had health issues back when he coached in Charlotte. Then he dealt with some with the Magic. From everything I heard, he was asymptomatic. So I think it was more of a scare than anything else. But he probably sees that the clock is ticking for him to really be competitive in the NBA.
So now, what do you think they go from here for a new head coach?
It's the typical list of, do you go with the hotshot assistant? Do you get somebody who used to be a head coach in the NBA and now finds themselves on the outside looking in, like a Terry Stotts, who was recently coaching the Trailblazers, Lloyd Pierce, who was the most recent coach of the Atlanta Hawks? I think those are some options. Or do you go the college route? Penny Hardaway is a popular name in Orlando, and try and bring him back. He's coaching Memphis right now. Or do you go with a former player who has no coaching experience, which sounds crazy, but that's exactly what the Brooklyn Nets did when they hired Steve Nash. So I've heard Chauncy Billups' name thrown out there. I have somewhat jokingly thrown out Greg Anthony as a possibility. His son plays on the team. Why not? So I think that they could go in a number of different directions. I don't think they're going to pigeonhole themselves into, we have to fill this one. We have to check this one box, and that's what we're going to do, and that's the only thing we're going to do. So this could really go in a number of ways.
If you had a crystal ball or a wish list, who would be your top candidate, buddy?
I think at the top of my list, I don't know who's not smiling ear to ear if Penny Hardaway is the head coach of the Orlando Magic. And that's not me saying that he'd be the best coach for the job, but I think it would be a really good feel-good moment for the fan base, because he's one of the most beloved figures ever here. I'll bring up another name that I just mentioned, Chauncy Billups, to me would be on the short list. I think we're seeing those cerebral point guards that have championship pedigree. If come in and they've done really good jobs, and early on in the NBA, we're looking for somebody who can mentor young guys. Who would do that better than someone who was just recently in the league and was one of the elite players in the NBA when he was there? So I think I'd have him towards the top. Kenny Atkinson, who was recently coaching the Brooklyn Nets, I think he did a phenomenal job, and he got ousted probably because Kevin Durant didn't want him. So that would probably be my top three. And just looking at it, and I'm kind of filling up my board with an array of different possibilities, guys that come from different places, and then we'll see where it goes.
Now, do you find the Orlando Magic job to be attractive?
Well, not really. Not at the moment. If we're judging attractiveness, it's attractive in that it's an NBA job, and there's only 30 of those to go around. A lot of the jobs are taken. There's not a lot of openings, and there are a lot of coaches that right now would, the assistants, those that were coaching in the NBA, all those people that in college that want to see a career in the NBA in the future. There are a lot of people that would want these jobs. So they're all attractive to some degree, but if we were ranking them, the Magic job as it stands right now, until they get the number 1 pick or the number 2 overall pick, it's not super attractive if you're comparing them to other jobs.
And tell me, if upper management hired you tomorrow to sort of be the ambassador for this job, how do you think you would sell it to other coaches?
Well, you always start, when you're selling Orlando, you start with it's a great community. It's a beautiful place to live. No state income tax. We've got for the roster itself, this team has cap space, flexibility over the next couple of years, the potential of 2 first-round picks in this year's draft, more first-round picks in the following year's draft, a returning Jonathan Isaac, a returning Markelle Fultz, and a slew of young talent that you would be able to have your fingerprints all over, coach up in your image, guys that are impressionable right now. There aren't giant egos that are going to try and bully you and say, this is my team, and sort of reject you as the head coach. So you can really come in here, blank canvas, with everything we have at our disposal, and we're not going to hit you with state income tax. All of that is an that is what makes this job attractive in for us, for the people that are here. They understand all of those things. But it's just when you end up comparing it to the Celtics job and the Trailblazers job where it doesn't look quite as good.
And you can go to Disney World whenever you want, right? So
exactly. That's what I mean. It's a good community. It's a great place to live. I love living here. And it's one of those places. Nobody's upset when they drive into Orlando. It's just not one of those places. So if you can set up shop here and then build a great basketball team, it's a great place to live. Stan Van Gundy still isn't left, by the way. Stan Van Gundy still has a home here, and he was fired by the Magic years ago.
He was, yeah. He has a home in Michigan too, because he likes the Michigan summers. So
that's right.
On the court, what do you think the Magic have to do this offseason to upgrade the talent and on the team?
So honestly, I don't really see them doing much. They have the ability to do it, but I think they'll probably target in terms of going after free agents, whether that's mid-tier or even upper tier. I think that's something that you're going to be looking at more in 2022. The Magic right now, as it stands today, quite frankly, don't have a lot of room to bring in free agents. So what they need to do is nail the draft. You've got, as I mentioned, a returning Markelle Fultz, a returning Jonathan Isaac. You still want to see what you have in Cole Anthony and RJ Hampton and Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Bamba. So there are a lot of guys that you need to give minutes to. There's only so many spots on an NBA roster. So with those guys returning from injury and the guys that are on the team right now that we saw in the back end of the year after the trade deadline that you still want to get some minutes to, who knows what happens to Otto Porter? He's still on the roster too. Imagine that turns into cap space, but I don't see them really making many moves in free agency as much as they need to. I mean, they need veterans and they need shooting, but will they go get it? I don't think this is the year for it.
So based on your last answer and your previous answer, I don't think you envision the Magic contending anytime soon. So my final question for you, Brendan, is how far do you think the Magic are from winning? Because, if you turn around the Magic sports-wise, you're a hero in that city,
Absolutely.
aren't you?
Oh, big time. Big time. We're just waiting to really grab hold of that one guy. And the Magic have had glimpses of him. Dwight Howard had the biggest staying power because he was here for 8 years. But the way that he left, he severed that relationship, unfortunately. Penny Hardaway, who I've mentioned, people love him here, but the tenure just didn't last very long. Shaquille O'Neal, it's the same thing. I think people are over the resentment that they had when he left in the 90s, but he wasn't here long enough to really form that bond with a Magic fan base. There's really nobody who has been equal parts great and loyal and been here for a really long time. Honestly, Nick Vucevic is probably the closest you get, but he was a fringe all-star. I'm talking about those real impact guys. So whether it's a coach that's of the elite level or a player, yes, this town is thirsty for somebody that they can call their own that can really make them feel proud, the same way that Damian Lillard does for the city of Portland. I think if you're being optimistic, Kevin, we're looking at 2 years to turn this around. If you're pessimistic, it's a giant question mark and closer to 8 years. So it just depends on, I happen to be a more optimistic person. I think if they land the right pick in this year's draft, we've seen how quickly you can turn things around. Just ask the Memphis Grizzlies and the Atlanta Hawks.
Absolutely. So, Brendan, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that, buddy?
Well, it's very easy to do it. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, at Brandon Kravitz across all of those platforms. I have a daily radio show in Orlando from 3 until 6 p.m. It's called In the Zone. You can find 96.9 The Game. It's the station I work for on the iHeartRadio app, so you can stream it wherever you are around the country or the world. And I also just launched a podcast very recently called The Brandon Kravitz Podcast, so you can find that wherever podcasts are found. So my hand is in many plates, Kevin, and I'd be happy to have all of you along for the ride.
I see that, and as I shared with you before this started, I consider Orlando to be my second home. So once the pandemic is over here, we should meet up the next time I'm down there. But for now, I want to thank you for joining me today to talk a little Orlando Magic basketball. Your time, insights, and perspectives are most appreciated, buddy.
Thank you, Kevin. It was my pleasure.